We examined a lot of outcomes well beyond the primary question. Our primary question was what proportion of patients get their high lactate levels down to 3 millimoles per liter at the 8th hour after transfusion. Very discrete question. We cut down the elimination of lactate many different ways, mathematically, to see what the time to lactate resolution was, what the rates were at every time point for lactate levels. And in addition to that, we did direct measurements of brain oxygenation with a non-invasive infrared spectroscopy device, as well as looked at a lot of the other markers that people worry are askew or askance when you have longer stored blood. People have worried that the potassium levels in the supernatant of the red cells might be higher, that the bicarbonate from acid buildup might be therefore lower. So we were looking at a lot of different biochemistries associated with storage markers and found, surprisingly, that all of these biochemical and clinical indicators were the same. The numbers were virtually identical in each arm. This was an adequately powered study, and so we're not worried about sample size having been insufficient. This statistical reassurance we have a lot of confidence in. So blood is stored for 5 to 6 weeks, depending on the rules. So there are bags with additives and preservatives, and the rules of how long something can be stored for, and this is under refrigerated conditions, depend really on studies of whether or not the cells are still there afterwards, rather than how well they work. And so this research for the first time actually explores how well stored blood actually works, not whether or not the red cells are still accessible. And indeed they were, because we measured the hemoglobin levels after transfusion and showed that at 24 hours the increments were also equally bountiful in this transfusion protocol. Yeah, I think the process to get institutional ethics review is certainly more rigorous when conducting research in children. And that is a challenge, but I think there really was equipoise or uncertainty, and there was a good reason to carefully study this and not worry prematurely that we can't even look at this issue. This research was essential to see if that last 10 days of storage by Uganda standards, which isn't even the absolute limit of storage in other jurisdictions that use the same setup for blood production. This could have gone, to 6 weeks rather than 5 weeks. But we chose to abide by Uganda's standard of a 5-week storage limit and limit what was defining extreme age as the last 10 days up to the 5th week. There are more studies coming out, I think studies much larger than the one that we conducted. To date, the 3 RCTs that have been done comprise almost 4,000 patients if you add them up together. So, the acronymic names of these 3 other studies were ABLE, RECESS, and ARIPI. Those have all been published, and now our trial, called TOTAL, is the 4th in the series. There are actually more coming. So it's not that I think that we need to fund a lot of new research in this, but there's going to be a lot more data coming, and I think it's all going to be on message. It's going to be consistent. So far, none of the investigators, when actually looking at longer storage, have found a signal of harm or lack of function at the far ends. And so I think what we're really seeing is a consistent message, no matter who the investigators are or where they're working. And that's really satisfying, because truth is the same wherever you look at it. Several years ago, I was worried about the storage lesion myself, and I would have wondered if I was a patient and I was getting something at the end of shelf life that I wasn't getting blood as good as something that was fresh. But I can honestly say now that because of what we found, that I would not be anxious if I was getting a unit, at the 4th, 5th, or 6th week of storage. I think this information has given me personally a lot of reassurance, and I think we can give that to patients, clinicians, and blood bankers to not be worried about, issuing blood at the end of shelf life. It's always first in, first out, and so cutting that inventory shorter limits your supply, uses up your fresh stuff. It's tough management, so I think we need to be good at our management and not throw anything out unnecessarily.